At my sister's wedding, she gave every bridesmaid a Tiffany necklace, except me. Hurt and suspicious, I took a DNA test that not only exposed our dad's affair, but led me to his dying secret daughter who needed help. I saved her life, uncovered years of lies, and now my mom is serving an 18-year prison sentence for what she did to keep it all buried. During my sister Sarah's nuptials last year, she presented all her bridesmaids with exquisite Tiffany necklaces. Everyone received one, except for me. My gift was an Ancestry DNA kit instead. To compound the situation, during her speech, she stood there in her $40,000 gown and spoke about how I was still discovering myself, suggesting this gift might assist me in uncovering my true identity. She delivered this line with a tone implying she possessed knowledge I lacked. Everyone chuckled, perceiving it as a sweet gesture, but I merely sat there, utterly mortified, plagued by a terrible premonition. A week later, my father returned for a visit, and his entire demeanor shifted the moment he spotted the DNA kit box on my kitchen counter. His complexion turned ashen, and he actually gripped my shoulders, pleading with me not to use it. He repeatedly uttered, "Some truths are better left undisturbed." I felt a pang of guilt, but I informed him I had already submitted the sample. Frankly, my curiosity had gotten the better of me. He literally reeled back, murmuring, "May divine help be with us all." 2 months subsequently, my entire existence was upended. I received an email about a half-sister match. This individual, Claire, contacted me immediately, and I could sense the urgency in her message. She was suffering from stage 4 kidney disease, and her mother was not a compatible donor, so she had resorted to DNA testing as a final desperate attempt to locate additional family members. My heart ached for her, and as we conversed further, I learned she was 30 years old, meaning she was born 2 years before me. This revelation made me feel ill, as it implied my father had engaged in an illicit affair. When I confronted my father, he literally collapsed before me, stating he knew this moment would eventually arrive. Before I could even process this information, he rushed directly to my mother and confessed everything. Her reaction, however, sent shivers down my spine. She was not nearly surprised enough. Then Sarah appeared, because, naturally, my mother had immediately summoned her. She immediately launched into an attack, accusing me of attempting to dismantle our family with my attention-seeking behavior. When I tried to explain that Claire was literally on her deathbed and required assistance, my mother simply stated that it was not our concern. 3 weeks later, at our customary monthly family dinner, I noticed something glimmering on Sarah's neck, and my heart simply ceased beating. She was adorned with my grandmother's pearl necklace, the very one my grandmother had promised me before her passing. I was supposed to receive it on my 30th birthday, which was only 2 months away. When I inquired about it, Sarah actually smirked and announced that mother had given it to her as a pregnancy gift, as she was the sole individual continuing the family lineage. My mother interjected, remarking that I was too preoccupied with unearthing the past to appreciate family heirlooms. Despite my family's deplorable treatment of me, I secretly met with Claire and her mother, Patricia. I am seemingly incapable of refraining from assisting others, even when my own family behaves as if I am non-existent to them. The moment I met Claire, I offered to undergo testing as a potential donor, because how could I not, when someone's life hung in the balance? That's when Patricia delivered the bombshell, presenting me with old letters and bank records proving my mother had been aware of everything from the very beginning. She had threatened Patricia and compensated her to depart from town, all while remaining with my father. She had written to Patricia about how she had cultivated a hatred for her own firstborn because she bore an exact resemblance to her father. Everything suddenly became clear. Why my mother always favored Sarah, why nothing I ever did was deemed sufficient, why I was perpetually a disappointment. I underwent testing immediately and spent the subsequent week compulsively checking my phone for results. When the call came confirming I was a perfect match for Claire, she sobbed with relief, and I promptly agreed to donate. Surgery was scheduled for the week following Thanksgiving, and I foolishly believed I could share this positive news at dinner. The instant I uttered Claire's name and mentioned I was donating a kidney, my mother became completely rigid. Sarah erupted, shrieking about me giving an organ to some random stranger, and I calmly clarified, "No, she's our half-sister. She's Dad's daughter." The room descended into chaos as the extended family began connecting the dots. My mother desperately attempted to silence it, but the truth was spilling out everywhere. My father finally confessed to the affair in front of everyone. Sarah's meticulously constructed world shattered in real time, and she began wailing that I had ruined everything. Her husband looked utterly appalled and simply exited without a word. Then my mother turned to me with more animosity than I had ever witnessed and declared, "This is why I never loved you like Sarah. You're just like your father. You destroy everything you touch. Even after that nightmare, I went to the hospital because Claire needed me. I might be overly accommodating, but I uphold my commitments. They were wheeling me into surgery, and I actually felt good about undertaking something meaningful, when suddenly a nurse rushed in, panic etched across her face, stating there was a significant issue. There's been a complication with the blood work. The surgery has to be postponed. My stomach plummeted as she wheeled me back to the prep room. Claire was already there, tears streaming down her face, while Patricia held her hand. The doctor entered, carrying a clipboard. His expression was solemn. I need to explain something unusual we found in your blood work, he stated, pulling up chairs for all of us. Both of you carry a rare genetic marker that affects blood clotting. It's called factor V Leiden mutation, but you both possess an extremely rare variant. The risk of complications during surgery is too high. Claire's shoulders trembled as she buried her face in her hands. Patricia gently rubbed her back while I sat there, feeling utterly helpless. The doctor continued, elucidating how this genetic condition rendered the transplant impossible between us. My perfect match status meant nothing if the surgery would jeopardize both our lives. Is there any other option? Patricia inquired desperately. The doctor hesitated. We need to locate another family member who's both a match and does not carry this mutation. The odds are slim, but it's conceivable. That's when it dawned on me. Sarah, my sister who seemingly possessed everything, whom my mother adored more, who was perpetuating the family lineage. She might be Claire's sole hope. I drove directly to Sarah's residence, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. Her vehicle was in the driveway, but Kyle's was absent, which was a relief. I knocked and waited, hearing her footsteps slowly approach. She opened the door just a crack. What do you want? Sarah asked. I need to speak with you. It's literally a matter of life and death. She rolled her eyes but allowed me entry. The house felt different. Boxes were stacked in corners, and family photographs were missing from the walls. She led me to the kitchen, where she was organizing papers. Kyle left, she stated flatly. Thanks to your little announcement at Thanksgiving. I elucidated the genetic condition, how Claire required someone else to undergo testing. Sarah listened while arranging bills into piles, her face completely devoid of expression. So let me get this straight, she finally said. You want me to get tested to potentially donate a kidney to Dad's illegitimate child? She's dying, Sarah. She's our sister, whether we acknowledge it or not. Sarah slammed her hand on the counter. She's not my anything. You destroyed my marriage, humiliated our family, and now you want me to surrender an organ? I remained composed, even though my insides were churning. Just get tested. That's all I'm requesting. You don't have to decide about donating unless you're a match. She gazed at me for a prolonged moment. I'll consider it. That night, my mother called, screaming so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Sarah had informed her about my visit. My mother ranted about how I was manipulating everyone, attempting to guilt Sarah into assisting strangers who meant nothing to us. She's Dad's daughter, I stated quietly. That makes her family. Family, my mother laughed bitterly. You want to discuss family after what you did? You're no daughter of mine. The line went dead. I sat there, staring at my phone, feeling more isolated than ever, but I couldn't surrender. Claire was relying on me to discover another solution. 3 days elapsed with no communication from Sarah. I spent them at the hospital with Claire, observing her struggle through dialysis. Patricia never left her side, dark circles beneath her eyes from sleeping in hospital chairs. On the 4th day, Sarah texted, Fine, I'll get tested, but I have conditions. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Sarah looked exhausted, her usually immaculate hair pulled back in a disheveled bun. She slid into the booth across from me. Here's the arrangement, she stated without preamble. I'll get tested. If I'm a match, I'll contemplate donating, but you have to do something for me first. Anything, I responded immediately. She produced her phone and displayed a screenshot. It was a social media post from Kyle with a photograph of him and some woman. I want you to uncover everything about her, who she is, how long they've been together, everything. Sarah, I don't believe that's my price. Take it or leave it. I consented, because what alternative did I have? Sarah scheduled her testing for the following day. I accompanied her, sitting in the waiting room while her blood was drawn. She did not utter a single word to me the entire time. While awaiting Sarah's results, I fulfilled her request. The woman in Kyle's photograph was named Jessica, a single mother he had encountered at the same grief counseling group where he had met Sarah. My stomach churned as I recognized the pattern. I discovered more photographs of them together, dating back months before he had even departed from Sarah. My mother commenced her campaign to ruin me the day after Sarah underwent testing. First, she telephoned my workplace, alleging I was mentally unstable and should not be entrusted with responsibilities. My boss discreetly pulled me aside, inquiring if everything was all right at home. Then she appeared at my apartment building, informing neighbors I was involved with dangerous individuals, suggesting they should exercise caution around me. My landlord knocked on my door that evening. Your mother was here earlier. She said some concerning things. I don't desire any trouble. I assured him there would be none, but I could discern the doubt in his gaze. My mother was systematically attempting to dismantle my life, and she was merely commencing. Sarah's test results returned positive. She was a match and did not carry the genetic mutation. When the doctor telephoned with the news, I experienced a blend of relief and apprehension. Now came the arduous part. I met Sarah at her house with all the information I had uncovered about Jessica. She perused the photographs and messages, her face growing paler with each one. He was cheating the entire time, she whispered. Even before we got married. I'm sorry, Sarah. I know this is painful. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. You know what the most agonizing part is? Mom knew. She had to. She always knows everything. But she pressured me to marry him anyway because he possessed wealth and status. We sat in silence for a moment before she spoke again. I'll do it. I'll donate the kidney. Really? But I have one condition, she stated, and my heart sank. I want you to promise me something. When this is over, when Claire is well, I want you to help me comprehend why Mom despises you so intensely. The genuine reason, because I'm beginning to suspect there's more to this narrative than any of us realize. I agreed immediately. Sarah scheduled her pre-surgery appointments while I updated Claire and Patricia. For the first time in weeks, Claire smiled genuinely. My mother's attacks escalated when she discovered Sarah was undergoing testing. She telephoned Sarah incessantly, appearing at her house uninvited, leaving voicemails about family loyalty and betrayal. Sarah ceased answering. One afternoon, I returned home to find my apartment door slightly ajar. Inside, items had been subtly rearranged. Nothing stolen, merely displaced. A message that she could access me whenever she desired. I installed new locks and a security camera that night. The harassment persisted. My mother informed my extended family I was coercing Sarah into donating a kidney, that I was manipulating everyone for attention. She persuaded my aunt to call me, stating I should be ashamed of myself. My cousin texted, inquiring if I had lost my sanity, but Sarah astonished me. She remained steadfast despite the pressure. When my mother confronted her in person, Sarah actually defended me for the first time in our lives. She's trying to save someone's life, Sarah told her. Perhaps you should attempt it sometime instead of destroying everyone around you. My mother's face turned purple with fury. Don't you dare speak to me that way. I've given you everything. You gave me lies, Sarah retorted. Just like you've been lying to all of us for years. The surgery was scheduled for the subsequent month. Sarah and Claire met for the first time at the hospital during preoperative appointments. It was awkward initially, but Claire's sincere gratitude seemed to soften something within Sarah. Thank you, Claire said simply. I know this isn't easy for you. Sarah nodded stiffly. Just take care of it, okay? It's the only spare I've got. As the surgery date drew near, my mother made one final desperate attempt. She appeared at the hospital during one of Sarah's appointments, causing a commotion in the waiting room. You're making a terrible mistake, she shrieked. That woman and her daughter are nothing but opportunists trying to acquire our family's wealth. Security had to escort her out while everyone gawked. Sarah was mortified, but it seemed to fortify her resolve. The night before surgery, Sarah telephoned me. I've been contemplating what you mentioned about Claire being family. I suppose I never considered how you must have felt all these years. Being treated as if you didn't belong. It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever received from her. Thank you for doing this, Sarah. I know it's not easy. Yeah, well, perhaps it's time one of us did the right thing for once. The morning of surgery arrived. Sarah and Claire were prepped in adjacent rooms. Patricia and I waited together, both of us anxious. Even Dad showed up, looking haggard and aged. I'm proud of you girls, he said quietly. Both Sarah and you. You're better than I ever was. I didn't know what to say to that, so I merely nodded. The waiting was agonizing. Hours stretched like days. Finally, the surgeon emerged with a smile. Everything proceeded flawlessly. Both patients are recovering well. The kidney is already producing urine, which is an excellent indicator. Patricia burst into tears of relief. I felt my own eyes welling up as the burden of months of stress finally began to dissipate. We were permitted to see them once they were transferred to recovery. Claire looked serene despite the tubes and monitors. Sarah was still groggy but managed a weak thumbs up when she saw me. For the first time in my life, I felt as though we might genuinely be sisters. The recovery room was quiet, save for the steady beeping of monitors. I sat between Sarah and Claire's beds, observing them both sleep peacefully. Patricia had gone to procure coffee, leaving me alone with my thoughts. That's when my phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. You think you've achieved victory? This isn't over. My blood ran cold. The message had to be from my mother. I deleted it and attempted to concentrate on the positive. Both surgeries had been successful. Claire would live. Sarah had performed a selfless act. Perhaps we could genuinely mend as a family. How utterly mistaken I was. The next morning, Sarah awoke properly and immediately requested her phone. I handed it to her, watching her expression transform as she scrolled through dozens of messages. Her face shifted from confusion to horror to fury in seconds. What is this? She showed me her screen. Screenshots of bank statements, legal documents, all sent from my mother's number. She's saying if I don't persuade Claire to sign papers renouncing any claim to Dad's estate, she'll ensure I lose everything in my divorce. I seized the phone, reading through the threats. My mother had engaged a private investigator to unearth damaging information about Sarah during her marriage to Kyle. Things that could impact custody of the baby she was carrying, things that could devastate her in divorce court. She wouldn't actually do this, Sarah whispered. But we both knew she would. Claire stirred in the adjacent bed, still frail but alert. She had overheard everything. I don't desire any money, she said softly. I just wanted to find my family. That's not the point. Sarah snapped, then caught herself. Sorry. I can't believe Mom would go this far. Patricia returned with coffee, immediately sensing the tension. When we explained what was transpiring, her face hardened. That woman never changes. 30 years ago, she did the same thing to me. Threats, manipulation, anything to safeguard her perfect life. Over the next few days, my mother's campaign intensified. She couldn't directly assault me at the hospital, but she found other avenues. My boss called, stating concerns had been raised about my mental stability and perhaps I should take some time off. My landlord left a notice that my lease would not be renewed due to complaints from other tenants. Sarah was experiencing it worse. My mother had contacted Kyle, of all people, feeding him information to utilize against Sarah in their divorce. Suddenly, Kyle was alleging Sarah had concealed assets, had been unfaithful first, was unstable and unfit to be a mother. All falsehoods, but lies supported by distorted half-truths my mother provided. I can't combat this, Sarah said during one of my visits. She looked exhausted, still recuperating from surgery while contending with my mother's assaults. She knows too much, possesses too much leverage. Claire watched from her bed, guilt etched across her face. This is my fault. If I hadn't reached out. No, I interrupted. This is Mom's fault. It's always been her fault. That night, I made a resolution. If my mother desired to engage in dirty tactics, I would have to as well. I telephoned Patricia and requested to meet privately. She agreed, suggesting a small diner near the hospital. I need to know everything, I told her over coffee. Everything about Mom's threats 30 years ago. What she did, what she said, all of it. Patricia studied me carefully. Why now? Because she's destroying Sarah's life to punish us for assisting Claire. And I'm done being her victim. Patricia produced an old folder she had brought. Inside were letters, photographs, even a cassette tape. Your mother was very thorough in her threats. But she made one error. She committed too much to writing. I spent hours reviewing everything. My mother's letters to Patricia were vicious, threatening not just legal action, but physical harm if she did not vanish. There were photographs of Patricia's apartment after it had been vandalized, her car with flattened tires, and the tape. My mother's voice, younger but unmistakable, describing precisely what she would do if Patricia ever contacted Dad again. She said she'd ensure I never worked in this state again. Patricia explained, said she had connections everywhere. And when I was 3 months pregnant, someone ran me off the road. No proof it was connected, but the message was unequivocal. My hands trembled with anger. This wasn't merely about safeguarding her marriage. This was about dominance, about annihilating anyone who jeopardized her flawless image. Can I make copies of these? I asked. Patricia nodded. I've preserved them all these years, hoping someday they'd matter. Perhaps now they will. Back at the hospital, Sarah's predicament was rapidly deteriorating. Kyle had filed emergency motions, claiming she was concealing money, that her family was involved in fraud. His lawyer was suddenly very aggressive, very well informed. My mother's handiwork was evident. He desires the house, full custody when the baby's born, no alimony, Sarah told me, tears streaming down her face. My lawyer says his claims are absurd, but will necessitate months of fighting them. Money I don't possess. Claire was well enough to be discharged, but declined to leave. I'm not abandoning you both after what you've done for me, she insisted. Patricia secured her a room at a nearby hotel, and they both visited daily. That's when matters became truly unpleasant. My mother appeared at the hospital with Dad and 2 lawyers. She marched into Sarah's room as if she owned the place, disregarding the nurse who attempted to stop her. Enough of this nonsense, she announced. I've had papers drawn up. Claire signs away any claim to inheritance, agrees to no further contact with our family, and this all disappears. Get out, Sarah said weakly. My mother's face contorted. Don't be foolish, Sarah. You're already losing everything to Kyle. Do you wish to lose your family too? We're not signing anything, I stated, standing between my mother and the beds. She directed her venom at me. This is all your fault. You couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? Had to unearth the past, destroy our family. You destroyed our family, I retorted. With your lies, your threats, your hatred. Dad stood behind her, silent as always. But something in his expression had altered. He looked weary, defeated, but also resolute. Margaret, he said quietly. It was the first time I had heard him use her full name. That's enough. She spun on him. Don't you dare. I said enough. His voice cracked like a whip. Everyone froze. I've allowed you to ruin this family for 30 years. I've watched you poison our daughters against each other. No more. My mother's face turned white, then red. How dare you? I'm done, Dad continued. Done with the falsehoods. Done with the manipulation. These are my daughters, all 3 of them. And if you cannot accept that, then we have greater problems than inheritance. The lawyers appeared uncomfortable. My mother sputtered, attempting to regain control. But Dad was not finished. I've already had my will updated, he announced. Equal shares to all 3 girls. And if you attempt to contest it, Margaret, I'll ensure everyone knows precisely why, including your cherished country club friends. My mother snatched the papers from the lawyer and stormed out, Dad slowly following. I had never witnessed him defy her before. It should have felt like triumph, but I knew my mother too well. This would only exacerbate matters. I was correct. The next day, my car would not start. The mechanic discovered sugar in the fuel tank. Then my credit card began getting declined. Someone had telephoned, claiming they were stolen. My bank account was frozen due to suspicious activity. My mother was employing every underhanded tactic she knew. Sarah was not spared either. Her divorce lawyer called, stating Kyle had suddenly obtained photographs of Sarah from college. Nothing illicit, but embarrassing party pictures that could be twisted to portray her as an unfit mother, photos only my mother would have possessed. She's going to annihilate us both, Sarah said during one of my visits. She looked dreadful. The stress was impacting her recovery. Perhaps we should just concede to her demands. No, Claire spoke up from the doorway. She was walking now, slowly but steadily. I've spent my entire life without a father because of that woman. I won't permit her to take my sisters too. It was the first time she had referred to us as sisters. Sarah began weeping, and even I felt my eyes water. We were a mess, all 3 of us, but we were finally unified. Patricia had also been busy. She had contacted an attorney, one who specialized in harassment and extortion cases. What your mother is doing is criminal, the lawyer explained during our meeting. These threats, the blackmail, the property damage, we can file charges, but we require proof it's her. Then we'll obtain proof, Patricia said firmly. I've waited 30 years for justice. I'm not waiting any longer. We commenced documenting everything, every threat, every incident, every piece of harassment. Sarah's divorce lawyer was brought into the loop and was appalled at my mother's interference. He began filing countermotions, exposing Kyle's sudden windfall of information, but my mother escalated faster than we could respond. One night, someone broke into my apartment while I was at the hospital. Nothing was stolen, but every family photograph was destroyed, torn to pieces and strewn across my bed. The message was clear. I was no longer family. The security camera I had installed caught a glimpse of the intruder, not my mother herself, but a man I did not recognize. When I showed the footage to the police, they stated that without clear identification, there wasn't much they could do. Sarah's house was next. She returned home from a doctor's appointment to find her mailbox demolished and the word traitor spray painted on her garage door. The neighbor observed a van speeding away but couldn't obtain license plates. She's hired people, Sarah said, staring at the vandalism. Mom's actually hired criminals to terrorize us. Claire and Patricia relocated from the hotel to Patricia's sister's house, an hour away. It was safer, but Claire insisted on still visiting daily. She was growing stronger, the kidney functioning flawlessly, but the stress was affecting her recovery too. Then came the escalation none of us anticipated. I was departing from work. My boss had reluctantly permitted me to return when a man approached me in the parking garage. He was clean-cut, professionally dressed, but something in his eyes made me freeze. Your mother sends a message, he said calmly. Cease now, or things will worsen, much worse. Are you threatening me? I managed to ask. He smiled coldly. I'm delivering a message. What happens next? Depends on you. He walked away before I could respond. My hands trembled so severely I could barely retrieve my phone to dial 911. But what would I report? A man spoke to me in a parking garage. Without proof of an actual threat, the police would do nothing. That night, I convened a family meeting at Sarah's house. Dad came, looking older than ever. We recounted everything. The threats, the vandalism, the man in the parking garage. His face grew paler with each revelation. I didn't know she'd go this far, he said quietly. I thought if I updated the will, she'd relent. You've been married to her for 35 years, Sarah said bitterly. How did you not know what she was capable of? Dad had no answer for that, but he did possess information. She's been moving money, he admitted. Large amounts from our joint accounts to ones I can't access. And she's been meeting with someone named Marcus. Says he's a financial advisor, but I've never heard of him before this mess began. Marcus. That had to be the man from the parking garage. My mother wasn't merely hiring random thugs. She was collaborating with a professional, someone who understood how to intimidate without leaving evidence. We need to be more astute, Patricia said. She had been quiet during the meeting, but now her eyes were sharp. Your mother believes she's the sole one who can play dirty. She's mistaken. Over the next week, we implemented Patricia's strategy. We began varying our routines, never traveling alone. We installed cameras everywhere. Our homes, our vehicles, even concealed ones we wore. We opened new bank accounts my mother was unaware of. Acquired new phones she couldn't track. Most importantly, we initiated our own investigation. Patricia's lawyer had connections, including a legitimate private investigator who began looking into this Marcus character. What he discovered was unsettling. Marcus Webb was a fixer, someone wealthy individuals hired to resolve problems discreetly. He had a record, but nothing recent. He was intelligent, cautious, and costly. The fact that my mother had hired him demonstrated how serious she was about annihilating us. But we found something else too. Marcus had a pattern. He had been linked to several harassment campaigns that had concluded unfavorably. One target experienced a nervous breakdown. Another lost custody of their children. But in each instance, when the authorities finally became involved, Marcus disappeared, and his clients were left to face the repercussions alone. He's going to expose her, the investigator explained. When things become too intense, he'll vanish with whatever money she's paid him, and she'll be left to confront the consequences by herself. It was almost poetic justice, almost. But we couldn't await my mother's self-destruction. The harassment was taking its toll on all of us, especially Sarah and her condition. The breaking point arrived 2 weeks later. Sarah had a prenatal appointment, and I accompanied her for safety. We were in the waiting room when she received a call from her neighbor. Someone had broken into her house in broad daylight. We rushed back to find police everywhere. The house had been ransacked, but it wasn't random. Every photograph of Sarah and Kyle had been destroyed. Her wedding dress, which she had been planning to sell, was shredded. And in the nursery she had started preparing, someone had left a note. No baby deserves a mother like you. Sarah collapsed in the doorway, sobbing. I held her while she shook, feeling my own fury building. This had gone too far. My mother had transgressed every boundary. That's it, I declared. We're ending this. That night, we put our plan into motion. We had been documenting everything. But now we organized it all. Every thread, every incident, every piece of evidence. Patricia's 30-year-old evidence, combined with our current documentation, painted a clear picture of a pattern of criminal harassment. But we required more. We needed my mother to incriminate herself directly. So we set a trap. Claire, brave Claire, who was still recovering from major surgery, volunteered to be the lure. She telephoned my mother directly, stating she was prepared to sign whatever papers my mother desired. She simply wanted the harassment to cease. My mother took the bait immediately. She arranged a meeting at a neutral location, a private dining room at an upscale restaurant. What she didn't know was that Claire would be wearing a wire, and we would have cameras positioned to record everything. The day of the meeting, we were all apprehensive. Claire looked pale, but resolute. The wire was meticulously concealed. The cameras were in place. Patricia's lawyer and the private investigator were standing by. Claire entered alone while we waited in a van outside, listening. My mother arrived 15 minutes late, making an entrance as always. Her voice came through the wire, crystal clear. Clever girl, my mother said. I knew you'd eventually see reason. I just want this to stop, Claire replied. The threats, the vandalism, all of it. My mother laughed coldly. Threats? I don't know what you're referring to, though I did hear about poor Sarah's house. Such a pity when people create adversaries. She was cautious, but Claire was patient. She slowly drew my mother out, playing the frightened victim flawlessly, and finally, my mother's arrogance got the better of her. You think you can just waltz into my family? My mother hissed. I've spent 30 years constructing this life, protecting my daughters from their father's weakness. I paid your mother to disappear once. I should have ensured she remained gone permanently. You threatened to harm her, Claire said quietly. She was pregnant, and you. I did what I had to do, my mother snapped. Just like I'm doing now. Sarah will thank me eventually. Once you're gone and she regains her life, she'll realize I was right. They always do. And if I don't sign? Claire asked. My mother leaned forward, her voice dropping. Then things will deteriorate. Marcus is very proficient at his work. Your mother's already experienced one accident. Accidents happen all the time. That was it. Confession to hiring someone to injure Patricia 30 years ago. Admission to hiring Marcus now, and a direct threat. We possessed everything we required. But Claire, brave Claire, pushed one more button. What about your other daughter, the one you abhor? My mother's voice turned venomous. She's not my daughter. She never was. Looking at her every day, seeing his face, knowing she was the reason I had to remain with him. I should have eradicated her years ago. But now she's finally revealed her true colors. And everyone can see what I've always known. She's poison, just like her father. The agony in those words struck me like a physical blow, even though I was prepared for them. Sarah, sitting beside me in the van, grasped my hand. For the first time in our lives, she was offering me solace. Claire rose to depart, but my mother seized her wrist. You're not going anywhere until you sign these papers. Let go of me, Claire said calmly. Sign them. My mother's voice was escalating. Sign them, or I swear. That's when restaurant security intervened. We had alerted them beforehand that there might be a disturbance. They separated my mother and Claire exited safely. My mother followed, furious, only to discover police awaiting her in the parking lot. The expression on her face when she saw the police vehicles was priceless. Shock, then rage, then fear as she realized what had transpired. Margaret Wilson, the lead officer stated, "You're under arrest for extortion, criminal harassment, and conspiracy to commit assault." "This is preposterous," my mother shrieked. "I haven't done anything. This is all fabrication." But we possessed the recordings. We possessed the evidence. We possessed 30 years of her transgressions, documented. As they placed her in handcuffs, she gazed around wildly and spotted me standing by the van. The animosity in her eyes was pure venom. "You did this," she snarled. "You've destroyed everything, just as I always knew you would." "No, Mom," I said quietly. "You did this to yourself." As the police car drove away with her, I felt empty. Not satisfied, not vindicated, just empty. Sarah put her arm around me, and Claire joined us. The three sisters standing together in a restaurant parking lot, observing our mother's arrest. But it wasn't over. Marcus Webb was still at large, and my mother would make bail soon. We had prevailed in a skirmish, but the conflict was far from concluded. That night, we all stayed at Patricia's sister's house for safety. Dad telephoned, devastated but not astonished. He had already initiated divorce proceedings and promised to testify, if necessary. The family was shattered, but perhaps that was essential. Perhaps we needed to completely break before we could reconstruct. Sarah's divorce took an intriguing turn. When Kyle learned about my mother's arrest and her involvement in providing him information, his lawyer advised him to withdraw. Suddenly, the aggressive demands vanished. He agreed to mediation, reasonable custody arrangements, and a fair settlement. Without my mother manipulating him, Kyle simply desired to exit the situation. But Marcus Webb presented a different challenge. With my mother arrested, he went into hiding. The police were searching for him, but he was too clever to be easily apprehended. We remained vigilant, never going anywhere alone, always observing. 3 days after my mother's arrest, I received a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "You've committed an error," Marcus's smooth voice stated. "Your mother was shielding you from uglier realities. Now you'll have to confront them alone." "Is that a threat?" I inquired, recording the call. "It's a warning. Some secrets are better left interred. Your mother understood that. Do you?" He disconnected before I could respond. His words sent a chill through me. What other secrets was my mother concealing? What uglier truths? I wouldn't have to wait long to discover. My mother made bail as anticipated, but with stringent conditions. No contact with any of us, surrender her passport, ankle monitor. She was facing serious charges, and her lawyer was reportedly advising her to accept a plea bargain. But my mother had one more card to play. The next morning, Sarah received a package delivered to her house. Inside were documents, old documents, birth certificates, medical records, legal papers. Sarah telephoned me, hysterical. "You need to see this," she said. "I can't. I don't comprehend what this signifies." I rushed over, Claire and Patricia following. What we found in those documents altered everything we thought we knew about our family. The birth certificate was mine, but it differed from the one I had always possessed. This one listed a different hospital, a different time, and the medical records. They showed that my mother had been admitted for psychiatric treatment right after my birth. Postpartum psychosis, they stated. Violent delusions, attempts to harm the baby. "She tried to hurt you," Sarah whispered, reading through the hospital notes. "When you were just days old, God, She really tried to. The legal papers were even more astonishing. Custody documents signed by my mother, granting temporary custody of me to Dad's mother for 2 years. 2 years I had lived with my grandmother while my mother received treatment, and I had no recollection of it. That's why she hates you, Patricia said softly. It's not because you resemble your father. It's because you remind her of her own breakdown, her own failure. Everything made sense now. The animosity, the favoritism, the constant rejection. I wasn't just Dad's daughter in her eyes. I was living proof of her deepest shame, her loss of control. There was a note with the documents in my mother's handwriting. You desired the truth? Here it is. I was ill. I recovered. I returned and attempted to be your mother. But every time I gazed at you, I saw that weak, pathetic woman who couldn't even love her own baby. So yes, I loathed you because you were my failure made manifest. Are you content now? I sat there, numb, as my sisters, both of them, embraced me. 30 years of pain, of wondering why I was never good enough, and the answer was that my mother had been broken from the outset. She had never healed, merely learned to conceal it. This does not excuse anything, Sarah said fiercely. Being sick doesn't grant her the right to torment you for 30 years or to threaten Patricia and Claire. Mental illness isn't a free pass for cruelty, Patricia added. They were correct, but it still stung. All those years of striving to earn her affection, and it had been impossible from the beginning. She wasn't capable of loving me. Perhaps she wasn't capable of genuine love at all, just possession and dominance. The documents would assist in court, though. My mother's lawyer could argue diminished capacity, but the pattern of harassment over decades would be difficult to defend. She had made her choices, ill or not. A week later, we received word that Marcus Webb had been apprehended in another state. He had been conducting a similar harassment campaign for another client and had finally made a misstep. He was facing multiple charges and would likely implicate his clients for a deal. My mother's situation worsened daily. Sarah's recovery was progressing well, and Claire was almost back to full strength. The kidney was functioning flawlessly, and the sisters who had been strangers were becoming true family. We dined together twice a week, sharing stories, learning about each other. Dad filed for divorce and moved in with his brother. He seemed relieved, as if a burden had been lifted. I should have departed years ago, he admitted during one visit. But I was a coward. I believed staying was protecting you girls. I was wrong. My mother's trial was set for 6 months out. Her lawyer was vigorously pushing for a plea agreement, but my mother was resisting it. She still believed she had done nothing wrong, that we were all betrayers who had ruined her perfect life. Some delusions, it seemed, were too deeply ingrained to cure. The trial date loomed closer, but my mother was not finished fighting. 2 weeks after Marcus Webb's arrest, I received a call from my bank. Someone had attempted to access my safety deposit box using forged documents. The attempt failed, but it indicated my mother was growing desperate. Sarah discovered her medical records had been requested by an unknown party. When she investigated, the request traced back to a law firm my mother had hired. They were digging for anything to use against us in court. She's attempting to prove we're all mentally unstable, Sarah said, showing me the paperwork. Look, she's requesting our therapy records, prescription histories, everything. Patricia's lawyer filed immediate injunctions, but the damage was being inflicted. My mother was painting a picture of 3 unstable women conspiring against her. Her new legal team was aggressive, filing countersuits claiming defamation, emotional distress, and elder abuse. The elder abuse claim was particularly ludicrous. My mother was only 58 and in perfect health, but her lawyers argued that the stress of our persecution had affected her well-being. They demanded damages and a restraining order against all of us. Claire received a certified letter at Patricia's sister's house. Inside was a formal demand for repayment of her medical expenses, claiming she had obtained the kidney through fraud and manipulation. The letter was from my mother's estate lawyer, suggesting my mother was already planning for a future where she might lose. Dad telephoned me one evening, his voice trembling. My mother had emptied their joint investment accounts before the freeze went into effect. Nearly $300,000 gone. She had also maxed out their joint credit cards, purchasing jewelry and other easily sellable items. My lawyer says it's asset dissipation, Dad explained. She's concealing money for after the trial, but proving where it went is almost impossible. Sarah's ex-husband, Kyle, suddenly reappeared, filing new motions in their divorce. He claimed Sarah had hidden her family's criminal activities from him, rendering their entire marriage fraudulent. My mother's fingerprints were all over it, feeding him information through intermediaries. We held another family meeting, this time including Patricia's lawyer and the prosecutor handling my mother's case. The prosecutor, a no-nonsense woman named Detective Rodriguez, laid out the situation bluntly. Your mother has resources and connections we're still uncovering, she said. She's been planning for this possibility for years. Hidden accounts, backup plans, people who owe her favors. The detective showed us financial records they had subpoenaed. My mother had been moving money for over a decade, small amounts that wouldn't trigger scrutiny. She had accounts in 3 different states, property we didn't know about, and a network of people willing to assist her. But we have the recordings, I pointed out, her confession, the threats, everything. Which her lawyers are already working to get thrown out, the detective replied. They're claiming entrapment, coercion, mental incompetence due to stress. They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Patricia slammed her hand on the table. So 30 years of harassment means nothing? She just gets away with it. Not if I can help it, Detective Rodriguez said firmly. But you need to be prepared. This is going to become uglier before it gets better. She was correct. The next week, Sarah went into premature labor. The stress had finally taken its toll on her body. I rushed to the hospital to find her in active labor. At only 34 weeks. The baby's coming, she gasped between contractions. It's too early. This is Mom's fault. The stress, the threats, everything. The doctors managed to slow the labor with medication, but Sarah was put on strict bed rest. Any more stress could trigger delivery, and the baby needed more time to develop. Claire and Patricia took turns staying with Sarah while I dealt with the latest crisis. My apartment building had received multiple complaints about me from concerned citizens. The complaints were obviously fabricated, but my landlord was nervous. I had 30 days to locate a new residence. My mother's church friends initiated a letter-writing campaign to the prosecutor's office, claiming my mother was a pillar of the community being persecuted by ungrateful children. They held prayer vigils for her, portraying us as the antagonists in this narrative. Local news picked up the story, though they couldn't use names due to the ongoing legal proceedings, but my mother ensured her version got out there through sympathetic acquaintances. Suddenly, we were being recognized in public, whispered about in grocery stores. Sarah's husband's family, who had initially been supportive, began distancing themselves. His mother telephoned Sarah, stating she didn't wish to be associated with a criminal family. The isolation my mother had always imposed on us was spreading like a contagion. Then came the development that changed everything. Detective Rodriguez called an emergency meeting. They had been investigating my mother's finances and found something unexpected. Your mother has been receiving large payments from an offshore account for the past 15 years, she explained, showing U.S. bank records. Always just under the reporting threshold, always to different accounts. We traced the source. She paused, looking at each of us. The payments are coming from your father's brother, your Uncle Robert. Dad went white. That's impossible. Robert died in a car accident 15 years ago. No, the detective said gently. He didn't. He faked his death and fled the country. He'd been embezzling from his company for years. Your mother helped him disappear in exchange for a cut of the money. The room erupted. Dad was on his feet, shaking. Sarah started hyperventilating, which terrified me given her condition. Claire and Patricia sat in stunned silence. She knew, Dad whispered. All these years she knew Robert was alive. She let me grieve my brother while she was taking his money. The detective continued. We believe she used some of this money to pay Marcus Webb and finance her harassment campaign. This changes everything. We're now looking at money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy charges on top of everything else. My mother must have caught wind of the investigation because her behavior became increasingly erratic. She violated her bail conditions by driving past Sarah's house. When police responded, she claimed she was just checking on her pregnant daughter. The judge warned her once. The second time she appeared at the hospital where Sarah was on bed rest, she was arrested again. This time, bail was revoked. My mother would await trial from jail. Her lawyers filed emergency motions, claiming she needed psychiatric evaluation, that jail was causing her mental health to deteriorate. But the judge had seen enough. My mother would remain incarcerated. With my mother in jail, some of the pressure eased, but her network was still active. Strange cars still drove slowly past our homes. Hang-up calls came at all hours. Someone kept signing us up for magazine subscriptions and food deliveries we hadn't ordered. Sarah went into labor again 3 weeks before her due date. This time, they couldn't stop it. I held her hand as she brought her daughter into the world. Tiny but flawless. She named her Hope, because that's what we all required. Claire was there too, the kidney donor who had become a sister. She wept when Sarah asked her to be Hope's godmother. Our fractured family was constructing something new from the remnants. The trial commenced 2 months later. My mother entered the courtroom in shackles, looking older and smaller than I remembered, but her eyes still held that familiar animosity when they landed on me. The prosecution presented their case methodically. The recordings of my mother's confession played for the jury. Patricia testified about the threats 30 years ago. Financial experts elucidated the money laundering scheme with Robert. When it was my turn to testify, my mother's lawyer attempted to portray me as a jealous daughter seeking attention, but I had documentation for everything. Every threat, every incident, every moment of harassment, all substantiated and verified. Sarah testified from a wheelchair, still recovering from her emergency C-section. She broke down, describing how my mother's harassment had nearly cost her daughter's life. The jury looked horrified. Claire's testimony was compelling. She spoke about growing up without a father because of my mother's threats, about discovering sisters she never knew existed, about my mother attempting to destroy those relationships too. My mother's defense was predictable: mental illness, postpartum psychosis that never properly resolved, a devoted mother attempting to shield her family from a husband's errors. Her lawyers depicted her as a victim of circumstances, but the evidence was overwhelming. The financial crimes alone would have sufficed. But combined with the harassment, the threats, the conspiracy with Marcus Webb, my mother had built her own confinement, brick by brick. The verdict returned: guilty on all counts: money laundering, extortion, criminal harassment, conspiracy to commit assault. My mother faced up to 25 years in prison. She displayed no emotion as the verdict was read, merely stared at me with those cold eyes. During sentencing, victims were permitted to give impact statements. Patricia went first, describing 30 years of fear and concealment. Sarah spoke about the pregnancy complications and the apprehension for her daughter's future. Claire spoke about finding and nearly losing a family. When my turn came, I looked at the woman who had given birth to me but had never truly been my mother. I contemplated all the words I could utter, all the pain I could articulate. Instead, I kept it simple. "I forgive you," I stated. "Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to harbor your hatred any longer. I have a genuine family now, and we're going to be all right." My mother's face contorted with rage, but she couldn't speak. The judge sentenced her to 18 years with a possibility of parole in 12. She was led away, still staring at me with venom in her eyes. Outside the courthouse, our peculiar little family gathered. Dad looked older, but somehow lighter. Sarah held baby Hope, while Claire doted over them both. Patricia stood with her arm around me, the woman who had been ostracized but never ceased protecting us from afar. "What now?" Sarah asked. "Now we heal," Patricia said simply. The media attention subsided quickly. My mother's church friends disappeared when the full truth emerged. Kyle slunk away when his source of information dried up. The harassment ceased completely with my mother behind bars and Marcus Webb testifying against her for a reduced sentence. I found a new apartment closer to Sarah and Claire. We had weekly dinners where Hope was passed around like a tiny football. Dad joined us sometimes, slowly learning to be the father he should have been all along. Robert was eventually apprehended in Thailand and extradited. The money was mostly gone, but at least the truth was revealed. Sarah's divorce was finalized with equitable terms. She obtained the house and primary custody of Hope. Without my mother's interference, Kyle became a decent co-parent, picking up Hope for his weekends without drama. Claire's health remained stable, the kidney functioning perfectly. She returned to school to become a social worker, desiring to assist other families fractured by secrets. Patricia observed her daughter flourish with pride. 6 months after the trial, I was packing the last of my belongings for the move when I discovered an old photo album. Pictures of me as an infant, before my mother's breakdown. In one photograph, she held me with what appeared to be genuine affection in her eyes. I kept that photo, not as a reminder of what we had lost, but as proof that even fractured individuals can experience moments of grace. My mother had been unwell, then she had chosen to remain bitter. I could have followed that path, but I chose differently. The doorbell rang. Sarah stood there with Hope in her carrier and Claire beside her. "Ready for lunch?" Sarah asked. I grabbed my purse and locked the door on my former life. Whatever came next, I wouldn't face it alone. We had constructed something my mother never comprehended, a family founded on choice, not lineage, on love, not dominance. As we walked to the car, Hope gurgled contentedly. She would never know the toxicity that had infected our family for so long. We had broken the cycle. My mother's legacy of animosity would conclude with us. "Hey," Claire said suddenly. "Did anyone else notice today's date? It's your birthday. Your real birthday, not the one on that fabricated birth certificate." I had completely forgotten. Sarah grinned and produced a small wrapped box. We didn't forget. Happy birthday to our sister who rescued us all. Inside was a simple silver necklace with 3 interlocking circles. "For the 3 of us," Claire explained. "The sisters who chose each other." I put it on immediately, tears blurring my vision. 31 years old, and I finally possessed the family I had always desired. Not the one I was born into, but the one we had fought to create. We drove toward the restaurant, Hope babbling in her car seat. My sisters playfully debating where to eat. Normal, beautiful chaos. The kind of life my mother had attempted to steal from us, but failed. I touched the necklace and smiled. We had triumphed, not because my mother was imprisoned, but because we had refused to let her hatred define us. We had chosen love instead, and that made all the difference.